Danish pastries. Who doesn't love Danish? Well, let's learn how to make it today. We have so many different wonderful varieties that you can do. It's really up to you and your creativity. So let's get started. As with any laminated dough, you have to go through the process of locking in the butter, first, second, and third turn. So as you can see here, everything is sped up, but I'm doing the same as the croissant. So take a look at how I lock in the butter here. I have to fold the dough in a little bit. This is the only real difference in the lamination process that's different from the croissant. So the reason why you do that is because the dough is just a little thicker, puffs up a bit more, and you want to make sure it doesn't squeeze out the sides. Don't forget to brush away the excess flour, and when you're doing your locking in, you want to make sure that everything is lined up. So locking in the butter is a very, very important step. Great, so let's start our first turn. You've seen this before, this is very familiar. You tap the dough out first, because if you go ahead and roll it right from the start, you activate the gluten. So we want to tap it out first, and now you see that I'm rolling it. So I roll it to about between 1/4 of an inch and 1/2 an inch thickness, and then I do my trifold, and this time, instead of freezing, we're only chilling in the fridge for 40 minutes. Turn number 2, second turn. Same process, tap it out, then roll it, trifold again, and refrigerate for 40 minutes. Help to relax the gluten and also chill that butter that's being layered on the inside. Don't forget to brush off the excess flour. So what I really love about Danish is that the dough is very forgiving. I would say more so than croissant. It has addition of eggs in it. There's a little bit more sugar. The yeast amount is a little bit more as well. And so the dough is puffier, and you don't have to get the layers so distinct. And therefore, it's just a little bit more forgiving. So you'll see at the end that I'll utilize my scraps in a wonderful, wonderful way. So I'm trimming the sides here, trimming the edges because this is my third turn, making sure that there's no excess flour. And the difference with this turn is that now we have to rest the dough overnight. Very important. Completely relax that gluten. Now it's time for cutting and shaping. This is the next day. The dough has rested overnight, and as you can see, it's much puffier. So we have to go through the same process, tapping and then rolling, but this time we're going to get our dough to a final thickness of 1/4 of an inch. And then we'll be able to do our measurements and get our Danish squares ready to shape. So how do you do your measurements? Well, it depends on how many of these squares that you want. So what I usually do is I get it to 1/4 of an inch first, and then I cut my squares. If I have any pieces left over, then I utilize that for additional Danish or other pastries. Really, really versatile dough. Now it's time to cut them into the 4-inch squares. Any excess dough that you have, just put it to the side, and any imperfect squares that you have, do not throw them. You're definitely going to utilize them. Now, an important note is to make sure that the pieces that you're not using at the time are still chilled. You only want to work with about 4 or 5 pieces at a time so that basically it's each shape. You want to work with each shape at a time. And that way you keep the dough nice and cold, keeps the butter nice and cold. Now that you have your pieces ready, go ahead and egg wash them. Then you will fill them with whatever you would like. I'm going to do these with cream cheese filling. And the first shape that I'm going to show you are called envelopes, a very classic shape. So take a look at how these are made. You kind of tug on one side, press down, tug on the other side, and then close. Make sure you pinch that shut. Bear claws. Man, are these popular. Now you can make them at home. See that I stretch the dough out just a little bit to make sure that I have the right thickness. Egg wash, and then as you can see, I have those bear claw filling logs ready to go. At first, I actually put in one log, but towards the end, you'll see that I get a little bit greedy and I end up adding 2 logs per bear claw. It's really up to you. They only really need 1, but hey, I wanted some more. And the filling right now is a little bit soft, so you have to work with it quickly. Make sure you seal them properly, and then you'll see how I actually cut the claws next. This is literally my favorite part of the entire Danish process, to cut the bear claws. There's just something very satisfying about it. So you do 4 little cuts about halfway into the dough, and then you expose the almond filling, and then that's your bear claw. Very cool. Now it's important to note that after each shape is put onto the sheet pan, I make sure and egg wash it. It keeps it moist in the proofing process. Here's another classic shape, pockets. So these have been stretched, egg washed, and I put a little streusel in the middle. It gives it just something of a nice surprise in the middle. You can put something else if you want, no problem. So notice that for these pockets, you bring all the corners in and then you give it a nice thumb squish, making sure that it is sealed. Now, in the oven, it will expand a little bit, of course expand, but it will also come apart a tiny bit too. Pockets are notorious for that, and that is fine. So don't worry about it. They are going to just open up a little bit in the oven. Now, after I've egg washed them, I put a little pastry cream and I'm topping them with streusel. So after these are baked, you can top them with fresh fruit if you like. You can leave them as is. You can put some flat icing. It's really up to you. Pinwheels, such a fun shape. So just with my bench scraper, I'm cutting almost to the center. You want to leave a little bit of space, of course, for your filling. So right now, after the egg wash, I go ahead and put a little bit of cream cheese filling, and you'll see the method of doing the pinwheel. It looks very complicated at first, but it's actually quite simple, okay? All you really need to do is to pull every other corner into the center. So you see every other point into the center, and then you press down with your thumb. Every other point into the center. We're going to add some poached pears to these pinwheels, and then we're going to move on to my favorite shape, frames. Very easy to do, but they look very complicated. So as you can see there, I'm opening up the dough. So let me show you a new one. All you have to do is fold it in half, so it's a triangle, and then you cut it with the bench scraper, but don't cut it all the way. You leave a little bit of dough uncut, and that's where you'll get the frame. You'll see in a second how it works. So after you've put your filling of choice, I went ahead and did a whole combination of things here. We got to close our frames. So you see I'm taking one side and the second side and just alternating them. Very easy. Don't forget to egg wash. So how about leftover dough? You're going to have a lot of leftover dough from trimmings. I happen to have a lot because I ended up making croissant, vegan croissant, and the Danish. And so I have a bunch. I'm putting it all together and I'm going to show you how to do the turn and making sure that you don't have a bunch of patchy areas. So as you can see here with some of the leftover pieces, I just rolled them thinner and I'm filling them with creamy spinach and some bechamel and sauteed mushrooms. Yummy! So here's where I roll out the scrap dough. As you can see, it looks really gross right now, messy. So we need to do a turn with the addition of 2 end folds. Okay, as I mentioned to you, it's a bunch of different types of dough together. And so I roll it out to about a 1/2 inch or 1/4 of an inch thickness, and then I fold the trifold, and you see how I pull in the 2 edges there, and I turn it over. Now I'm going to give it a tap, roll out, and I need to rest it for at least 40 minutes. So here's just a few varieties that I have here. I also had some fun with some leftover dough in a little bit. But let's talk about proofing. How are you going to proof your Danish? The same way you're going to proof, well, basically anything else that you have either at home or in the workplace. If you don't have a proofer, I gave you an option to do it in an oven where you have a hot water container or something next to it, and just make sure that they are egg washed, because if they're not, then you'll be proofing with the dry dough on the outside. So you'll see right here that I have the items properly proofed. You see that it expanded quite a bit, and you can also test it by giving it a little pinch or a little press to see how soft that dough is. Now before they go in the oven, you have to give them one last egg wash and any potential garnish that you might have. So as you can see here, I'm egg washing my bear claw right before the oven, and I've also garnished it with some sliced almonds and streusel. So these just got egg washed and they are ready for the oven. They're going in at 375 degrees for the first 12 to 15 minutes, and then decrease to 350 degrees for the remaining time until they are even and golden brown. This is after the first 15 minutes in a 375 degree oven. I rotated them and decreased the oven temp. You can make homemade nappage with just watering down some apricot jam or apple jelly. Now it's finally time to enjoy our Danish. I'm brushing on a little nappage here. My Danish is fully cooled, and I decided that I wanted to add a little bit of fresh fruit on top. It looks beautiful, and it creates a great balance of flavor and texture. I'm also nappaging some of the other ones too, and as you can see, there's different shapes. So I showed you the frame, the pocket, this is the pinwheel. Take a look at those layers. Yes, we have achieved the layers that we want. Now here's our envelopes. I did the nappage and also garnished with some fresh raspberries. Now my favorite ones are the bear claw. Absolutely delicious here. Really crunchy and almondy. And then these 2 savory frames that I'm just drizzling with a little bit of truffle oil, and I have just some shaved truffle cheese. Yum!